Hello everyone and welcome to Unit 4 of the Advanced Excel course where we'll be talking about information functions. So what is an information function? An information function is a Excel formula which tells you about your operating environment. So what that means is things like the version of Excel you're running, how many active tabs you have in your workbook, where your workbook is saved, the recalculation mode that your Excel is in. So things like that you wouldn't expect to see within a sheet, but more to do with the Excel system itself. So let's go through some examples. So the main example of an information function is the cell function. And this is actually a formula that you can type into Excel. And it follows this formula structure here where you go equals cell information type and then reference. So you can get a few different examples. You can get the format of a cell, you can get a worksheet name, or you can get a cell alignment or column width. So here we have a cell formula in action. As you can see, we've gone equals cell and then we've typed the format in apostrophes here because we want to retrieve what kind of format this particular cell is in. And then over here we've got our reference cell, so we want this cell over here. So as you can see, this is formatted as general. And when we type in this formula, what we're going to get is the letter G. Now Excel has a code which corresponds with an Excel formatting. So for example, G for general, you're going to have different letters for these. You can have certain dates set out in a certain way, so D1, D2, and a time in a certain way. So if we change this to, let's say, a long date, and then just refresh the formula, we're going to get this D1, and you can see it's formatting as D month by month, YY, which is, it's not picking up because it's not actually a date. I just formatted it as one. But therefore Excel has said this is formatted as a date. The next function that I would like to show you is using the cell function to get the file name. Now what we're going to use is we're going to say at cell equals cell apostrophe file name for the info type, and then in the reference name we're going to go B2 over here. Now what this is going to do is it's going to pull the location of the file, including where it's saved, and the sheet name that the cell we've selected is located on. So as you can see, this is example 02, therefore it's going to say file name blah 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 x02, and if you save this file somewhere else, this will update as well. So this could be a handy way of keeping a track log in your Excel workbook of where you've saved it. You might have sent an email to a colleague or to someone, and later you want to track down where you actually had the original workbook. Well, if you kept a log somewhere in your workbook using this at cell function, you can easily track down where you saved that file. Now we can also combine this formula with a mid function, which we talked about in the intermediate course, how we can extract just the tab name from this full file name. So what we can do is we can combine the cell function within the meds. So starting off as the text, we're going to take the entire file name. We're then going to combine it with a find function, I should say, and looking for the end bracket over here, which is the separator between the tab name and the file name. And then 32 is the maximum number of characters in a tab name. So if we use this formula as such, we can extract just the worksheet name from a different tab. So if we copy this over here, we've now updated it so it reflects X03. So you can have a little tab at the top that says tab name, and then put your formula over there. Just a little cool formatting thing you can do in your workbooks. And now on to the final demonstration that I'm going to show you for the cell formula. we've got a number of different values, or I should say info types, listed in this table below. These are all the different options, and then we've also got a reference cell up here. So currently this is the info type is linking into this cell here, B4, and we've got a drop down box which is matching this table down here. So we can scroll through different options, let's say address, and now this cell function will combine this info type with this reference, and it's going to pull out, for example, the address of that particular cell, the column number of that particular cell, the color of that particular cell, the contents, the file name, the format, etc. So let's just have a quick scroll through some of these. So file name, protect, i.e. whether it's protected or not, the number of rows of the cell, the type of data in the cell, so B equals blank, I equals not blank, the width of the cell, the type, the prefix, if there is one, the format, and so forth. So there's lots of different options. So I'm just going to quickly show you how we actually did this. So we're going to use the data validation tool. So you simply select the cell where you want the drop down, press data validation, and then you want list, and then you can choose a source. So in this case we've actually got a named range, which correlates with this over here. But alternatively, what you can do is you can just select the options like that and press OK, and then you'll have a drop down box which you can link cells to and make this a dynamic form. The next formula we're going to talk about is the isBlank function, which is a really useful formula in Excel. And what this formula does is it tells you if a cell is blank. For example, in this cell here, and if it is blank, you tell Excel what you want to be the true outcome, or if it's not true, you tell Excel what you want the false outcome to be. So consider this scenario over here where we've got a company which is banking a number of checks of these amounts over here. Now the way the checks work is that the funds only hit your bank account if the check's being cleared. So we want to know what's been banked and what's outstanding by whether or not it's got a cleared date. And one way we can do this is with the isBlank formula. Now the isBlank formula, as I mentioned, is equal isBlank value. So let's say this one here, which we know is blank. What it's going to say, it's either going to say true, or if I drag it up one to correspond with the cell above it, i.e. this one here, it'll be false. So what we can do is we can actually combine that with an if formula, and then we will get a, we can insert what we want as an outcome if it's either true or false. So for example, if this is blank over here, I want this to go in the outstanding column, and if it's not blank, I want to go in the banked column, because if there's a date here, then obviously it has hit our bank account. So how we can do this is we can go if isBlank, select the cell, if isBlank, and then value if true. So if it is blank, what we want the value in this to be 0, don't we? Because we want it to go in the other column. And if it's false, we want it to be this value here. Now, what we also want to know is we want to copy this across to this formula over here. So if G32, this should be F, if F32 is blank, we want this to be F32, and so forth. So now we can drag this down like so. Oops, sorry. F34 should be E32 in this column. There we go. So now we know, because this has a blank column, that if that is blank, then we're going to put a value in this column which is equal to that. and this is our outstanding amounts. And then we can subtotal what we've banked and what is outstanding. So a similar formula to the isBlank function is the isError function. So it works in a very similar way. And basically, if there is an error in that cell, Excel will generate true. And if there is not an error in that cell, Excel will generate false. So here we've got a little example down the bottom where we want to create an input form for our suppliers where they insert the cost of the crate and the number of bottles in the crate. Now what I want to know is if a supplier puts in a value that results in an error, for example 0 bottles in a crate, and the reason that's going to be an error is because you can't divide anything by 0. You get the div 0 error. What I want to happen is I want a message to pop up that says try again. Now we can do that using the isError function. So the way we can get this to work is we can do our isError function like so, isError like that. So if that value, I'll choose this value at the top, or we could just do E40 divided by E41, which is, that should be the output value over here. So if that's an error, let's add an if function over here. If that is true, so there is an error, I want the text to say try again. And if it's not an error, I want it to actually calculate it. So we want to go that divide by that and close it off with a bracket. So now if they put a value of 1 in there, they're going to get 24 for a single bottle, or if they accidentally put 0, they're going to get an error and say try again. So that's how we can use the isError function. So similar to the isError function, we've also got the isOdd and isEven functions. Now they work in a very similar way. It's just you type isEven and then the cell reference, and if it is even, you'll get a true, and if it's an odd number, you'll get a false. Of course, it's vice versa if you use the isOdd function, where it'll give you a value of isTrue if you have an odd number in here. You'll see some examples here where it doesn't work with decimal numbers. They must be whole numbers. It doesn't work with text or numbers or dates, sorry. Now a good application of these two formulas is in modeling. For example, you may have a number of months. It may be on an odd month where you want something to happen, or it may be on an even month where you want something to happen, in which case you could use a combination of if and the isEven function to calculate a value if a month is a even month. So that's one practical application of this. Alternatively, you could use the mod function, but the mod function, whilst more versatile, this can be a little bit quicker if you're trying to achieve that singular purpose of either an even or an odd function. So continuing on with these information types of functions, we've got the isNumber and isText. Now this again works in the exact same way. You type isNumber or you type isText, and you simply type the cell reference number. Where you have an entry where it is a number, you'll get a result of true. Where it's not, you'll get a result of false. So here's some examples here where you're getting a date comes as true, a number comes as true, a blank comes as false, an error comes as false, and text comes as false. Now this may be applicable for certain situations where you want to verify the formatting of data. Maybe you have some output from your payroll system which looks like numbers, but it's actually recognized as text. And you won't be able to do formulas and stuff with that. So maybe you want to do a quick test and say isNumber, and if it's true, it'll come up as true. So you can use that as a verification. So we've also got this isText function, which is the inverse of that. So you can see some examples here where we've got text here, hello, that'll come as true. We've got numbers and dates and blanks will all come out as falses. last but not least of information functions, we've got the type function. So what the type function does is it will take a certain cell reference and tell you what type of text it is, or number it is, or logical value it is, and so forth. So these are the possible options over here. So a cell can be either a number, a text, a logical value, an error value, or an array. Now, depending on whether the output is one of these, it'll give you this code over here. So for example, we've got a number over here, so you can see formatted as a number. So using the type formula, we're going to get number 1. We've got some text over here, so type formula on that would get us number 2. We've got a logical value, so we're saying is text that, F5 if that's true, then type of that would be 4. Over here we've got an error because we're trying to divide the above by 0, so that type of that is 16. And then finally we have an array formula. Now an array formula is when you're trying to sum multiple different values within a range, and the range may be non-contiguous, it may be between different tabs, or it may be 2 different series that you're trying to sum or multiply together. And you can differentiate whether it's an array because it's usually got these little these symbols over here which look like little squiggly brackets, like so. And if we have a type of that, then we get 64. So that's everything for information functions. Just to recap, it's a way of getting information around the operating environment of the Excel document that you're working in. And there's some cool little tricks in there to improve your Excel. For example, in the cell function, getting the name of the file, and then using is blanks into your Excel modeling as a means of establishing where there are blank cells, and then you can incorporate into your modeling, on occasion, is odd, is even, is number, is text as an option instead of the mod function if you like.